How's everybody doing out there? Come on, I'm in the entertainment business. I said, how's everybody doing out there? Much better. It's always the second time that does it. I don't know why that is. I need a psychologist to figure it out. I'm here, having spent my entire adult life in the music business, running big record companies like Atlantic, Virgin, and Capitol, and spending the rest of my time trying to reform the criminal justice system in this country, which is a disaster, and we're going to talk about that. But before we do, and before I introduce our other guest, I want to tell you a little story about what it's like being in the music business, because people ask me, how do you deal with these pop stars and rock stars that make up my daily life? And so the story is a story about a guy who's in a hot air balloon and he's lost. So he lowers himself down, so he's about 30 feet above this field, and he yells down. He sees a guy standing in the field. He yells down, says, "Excuse me, I'm lost. Can you tell me where I am?" The guy in the field looks up and he says, "Yeah, you're in a hot air balloon about 30 feet above this field." So the guy looks back down and he says, "Well, that's great, but if you don't mind me asking, are you a record executive?" And the guy looks up and he says, "Yeah, I am, but how do you know that?" And he says, "Well, because everything you've told me is true, but it's of no use to anyone." And the guy looks back up and he says, "Well, if you don't mind me asking, are you a recording artist?" And the guy looks down and he says, "Yeah, I am, but how'd you know that?" And the guy says, "Well, because you don't know where you are or where you're going. You're in exactly the same spot you were when we first met, but now all of a sudden it's my fucking fault." So here in New Orleans, I'm extremely pleased to be able to introduce the only person I know that can be introduced the following way. This is someone who's won Grammy Awards, run for president of a Caribbean nation, and who recently was wrongfully arrested outside a four-star hotel in Los Angeles. He's also an incredible spirit and somebody I'm happy to consider a dear friend. Please welcome the one and only Wyclef Jean.
What's up? How y'all doing out there? Make some noise, Collision!
There we go.
Yeah. What up, baby?
You know, just here in New Orleans, kicking it, you know, with you, and excited to be here with all the techies. You know what I mean?
Yeah, shout out to all the techies, and make sure y'all enjoy the music out here. The music is definitely incredible. I had a chance to jam at the House of Blues and a few different places. Now, real quick, all you techies that are looking at this, y'all saying, what qualifies Wyclef as a techie? Let's get into it real quick. Do anybody in this room got a copy of the Fugees' The Score? Okay, perfect. And if you don't got it, go get it. But this is, listen, this is the most selling hip-hop group of all times, right? But the most important thing is, this album was done in my uncle's basement. This whole, what do me and Steve Jobs have in common? We both worked out of the garage. So I was in the hood, the booger basement, the crack house in the back. This is all a true story. I used to go to Sam Ash. I had no money. I had a brain. I studied all of the manuals. So, you know, like a record, like when y'all hear Killing Me Softly, one time, two time, that is not a Fender Rhodes playing. It's a vibration from a 440 oscillator. So please check on that vocabulary. Now they're like, yo, that Clef kid might really be a nerd for real, you know what I mean? So let's get into it. Give yourself a round of applause, baby. Get into it.
Yeah, and afterwards there'll be a Q&A, and he'll drop some more stories on you about the making of that seminal album. Wyclef, it's amazing to be here in New Orleans. You know, we have in common both music and criminal justice reform.
Yes, sir.
And it's interesting to be here in particular because the United States incarcerates more people per capita than any nation in the world. 5 times the rate of the rest of the civilized world, the Western world. Louisiana incarcerates more people per capita than any other state, and New Orleans incarcerates more people per capita than any other county in Louisiana. So we are actually in the epicenter of the problem of mass incarceration.
Yes.
And I want to talk about that because the tech community is stepping up. I think it's now become, when I started working on this issue 25 years ago, back probably when you were making that record, it was sort of like, I felt like Don Quixote. People are like, what are you doing jousting at that windmill? Like, nobody cares about that shit. And now you have people like Mark Zuckerberg and Dustin Moskovitz with his foundation and others who are stepping up and realizing that this problem is a national disaster and it's a national disgrace.
Yeah.
And I want to get your take on it and talk about some solutions and your own personal experience that you had just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, so we'll probably start with my solution, right? So my daughter's 12 years old, right? So she's very sharp. So I'd be like, yo, Angie, the police stop you? Here's a list of things that you don't do. You don't talk loud. You call the officer, sir. And then she's looking at the Instagram, and then she sees her daddy being cuffed like this, right? As I'm being cuffed, I'm like, yo, roll the Instagram. Yo, I'm out here, the LAPD picking me up. I don't know what's going on. So the first call I get is my daughter, right? And she go, Daddy, I ain't see you cursed at the police. You did everything you told me to do, and he still put you in handcuffs. And so what do? And I say, you do exactly the same thing that I told you to do. Now, the interesting thing about this is, all jokes aside, the idea of mass shooting now with police, it's almost like when it happened to me and I'm reading the sheriff's report, right? I happen to be alive. It says Wyclef went for his waistband. And I told TMZ, I was like, I've never went for my waistband, but could you imagine if I was not alive?
What were you going to pull out of your waistband, a Grammy Award?
I don't know.
It's ridiculous.
Maybe either that or a microphone.
Exactly.
But no, but the idea of me stepping out of my car and you telling me hands up and I'm going to go for my waistband, right? As funny as it sounds, lucky it was Wyclef. But now let's go with the fact of when we're dealing with policy, legislation, prosecutors, and tampering with information. So imagine if I'm alive to say this, but what about those that are not alive to say this? So that means that the law is mostly on the side of the prosecutors, the police, and on the side of the citizen, information is tampered with all the time. And if the victims are not alive, we have come to a system where we've accepted it to be so natural. And that's a system that we need to fight because that's not right.
And it's interesting, too, because while you can't say that videotaping, like the advent of everything being on video, right? And some of the police departments now are having body cameras as a routine thing. They all should. But everybody has a phone, everyone has a video. And that is actually sort of a tech solution because no longer can they say you were reaching for your waistband, or what just happened in Texas the other day, where the cops had to change their story several times already now because unfortunately the video emerged that showed that kid, that 15-year-old kid, rest in peace, was of no threat to the officers or that particular officer, and now at least he's been fired and hopefully he'll be prosecuted because the videotaping is the truth. But if you imagine for so many decades now what's been happening, and we're just talking about one small slice of the overall problem, which is police shootings. But I want to talk about the beginning, middle, and end of what happens in these situations, right? We have a problem in this country with arrests, sweeps of the ghetto, where people are just picked up for doing essentially nothing, and in almost every case doing things that if they were in, with the exception of violent crimes, which is a very, very small percentage, remember, of the overall arrests in this country. Something like 85% of the people are in for misdemeanors. But the question is, if they were in a different neighborhood, the type of neighborhood where I grew up, they wouldn't have been arrested. I tried to get arrested when I was a kid. I had hair down to here, and I always smelled like pot because I had so much hair, and it's so thick, and I was always smoking and I would bump into cops. I'd be like, oh, sorry, officer, and they'd be like, I'll put that out, So had I been in the hood, I would have been arrested, and I would have had a record, and we know where that leads. Then you have a mugshot in the book, and then that leads to wrongful convictions down the line. And I have a podcast called Wrongful Conviction, in which I interview exonerees each week, people who served 10, 20, 30 years, and it's based on my work with the Innocence Project. for things that they didn't do. And sometimes that's one of the causes, the fact that they were in that book because of a minor altercation with the police, which is virtually unavoidable.
Definitely. But you said something where you said body cam, right? So body cam is one of the tech solutions, right? But even if for coding, you want to solve a solution, right? So basically, problem equals solution, right? The problem has to still be solved by a human being, right? So the human being, the psychologics, is the officer. So hold off on the body armor for a second, and let's deal with the person who's doing the coding. You know, I gotta bring it tech so they get into it, right? So basically, the person who's giving that information and putting you in a situation where the body armor is on you, before the body armor, the training has to be that you cannot, your first reaction cannot be fear towards the citizen. And what's going on is, in these raw situations, what's happening is, so if you're a police and you're from Queens and then you're guarding Chicago, and I was born in Chicago, but you're from Queens, automatically there's a fear with the citizen and the police. So I think it starts off with legislation, it starts off with policy, it starts off with senators, it starts off with these rural communities, right? It starts with a combination of, can the private sector work with government to help provide jobs within these communities, right? Because look, you get caught for weed, I'm smoking the same weed. But when the dude catch me smoking the weed, he not giving me a Willie Nelson pass. I don't get that pass. I get the Lil Wayne pass. You see what I'm saying? And the reason that happens is, think about it. We're basically talking about communities. So when you just brought me to the barbershop, we both just got a haircut, right? Now, the guys who was cutting my hair, I think he did like 21 years of prison. And he was wrongfully convicted. And at the end of the day, he got a chance to get a job and change his life around. So what if we start to look at this the reverse and says, we as the tech community, what if we take a chance and start working and investing in these rural communities, if these politicians are not doing that, to help turn some of these legislations around? I think that could be a help.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up. And yeah, in case you were wondering why we both look so good, it's because we were at the Real Gentleman Barbershop a little bit earlier in the 7th Ward, and the guys hooked us up. And actually, the guy you're referring to, Robert Jones, did 23 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, and was freed less than a year ago. And through this organization, the Rising Foundation that I work with down here, they were able to get set up in a barber shop, and they're building a business. They run a foundation out of the back room called the Freedom Foundation, Freedom, actually free-DEM Foundation. I was telling Clef that I think their grandchildren are going to be talking about the day that Wyclef came and did a concert in the barber shop, because it was pretty insane. While he was getting a haircut, he's singing, and it was pretty fun. And where were you guys, by the way? We were looking for you. So yeah, but that's something that I do want to bring up too. You know, people say, well, what can I do? How can I make a difference? The fact is, the business community in Louisiana right now is leading a charge to reverse the mass incarceration that is plaguing this state. And it's a problem that is costing the state billions of dollars, not only in terms of locking people up and what that cost is, but also the cost of them not being able to get a job when they come out, not being able to pay taxes, and ultimately having no choice but to return into the system. And that's something, you know, it's amazing when the private sector does get involved in the way that they are. And this is being led by a lot of conservative groups here, because they don't like mass incarceration either, right? That looks like big government to them. And so it's a great coalition of the left and the right that's finally waking up to the reality that we cannot just lock up generations of people. It is really the new Jim Crow, and that's a great book. If anybody's read the Michelle Alexander book, The New Jim Crow, it talks about this in great detail. But another thing is, and what I hope, one of the things that will come out of this talk, is that these people are people. The justice system treats them like numbers. Prosecutors, to an extent judges. The system is designed to fail. In Louisiana, anybody see the 60 Minutes piece a couple weeks ago where they talked about how there's 52 public defenders in New Orleans that handled 20,000 cases last year. So what are your odds? If you're being defended by one of these people, what are your odds? You're basically done. You have a lot of people pleading guilty because they know that pleading innocent is not going to get them anywhere except a longer sentence. But on the back end, with these people getting out of prison, there's an opportunity for everybody here to open your mind and say, and look at them differently. Don't look at somebody as an ex-con or an inmate or whatever it is, but a person that needs another chance. And some of the guys we saw today are perfect examples of that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I think the way that the tech community, the business community can help is to invest in human capital, right? Take a chance at a human being. Statistically, we know the data, we know the analytics, and you know what the cities are producing. And luckily, being in the hood, I got a chance to have a mother and a father. And statistically, that basically changed. To a kid now, his mother and his father is basically his technology. As he moves around, he's figuring out what's on YouTube, what's on Twitter. This is his technology. So with this information, there's a way to turn this information and take that same information, educate them with the information, and at the same time, take a chance, like take a risk, because you are creating things, you are building things, and as inventors, as you build, you are going to need a workforce. So what we discovered today is at the end of the day, if you have work for people, they will work and they will not go out to these streets. And in order for that to happen, I always believe like small government has to work with private sector. I think that's just the way of the future for it to really happen. But it basically starts off with us, right? And sometimes people be like, oh man, you talking all of that, you could do that because you're in that position, right? But no, I mean, I was like 16 years old when my daddy was like, okay, we're gonna go through the collection plate and we each gonna give $1 for Haiti. I didn't know what that meant until I went to Haiti and I saw what that dollar did for 6 people. So at the end of the day, if you can help one person in a rural community, right? Check out these public schools. Check out the academics of a lot of what these kids are doing. You'll be surprised if you create programs and put these kids in programs, how much you'll see us start to change. Use me as a model, because I came from nothing. My brothers, we were in the ghetto and we were debating against kids from Harvard, and they could not believe that we were from Newark, New Jersey. And this is a lot of what's being produced. So I want the tech community to take more of a chance and more of a risk in training and investing kids in these rural communities.
And it's happening, Clef. You know, in San Quentin, there's now a tech incubator inside the prison. And maybe some of the people here are even involved with that, or at least know about it, but it's an incredible program that is bringing the future inside those walls, bringing hope to a place where there is none, and starting to mine as you said, the human capital that's in there. I think another really important thing that you reminded me of is free wireless. Like, this is a country where there should be free wireless, because for the kids in these failing public schools, they may have a totally inadequate, I mean, some places in this country, in Oklahoma and other places, they're going to 4 days a week school because they don't even have enough money to operate the schools 5 days a week. And the teaching, we know that in a lot of places the teaching is substandard, and again, that goes back to the school to prison pipeline. But what we do know too is these kids can go online. They can go learn a calculus from Conf, right?
Yes.
All these other things, but they have to have free wireless, because if they can't afford wireless, you're just digging a deeper and deeper hole that these kids can never get out of. And I'm a big believer in second chances. You know, I know when I look at, and I'm not a religious person, but I look at any of the men and women that we help, whether through the Innocence Project or these other organizations, and I go, there before the grace of God go I, because it could happen to anyone. These things, these wrongful convictions, they cut across, yes, it's concentrated on the poor, it's concentrated on minorities, but it could happen to anyone. And so the idea of giving people a second chance, even sometimes, and I've learned this, right? There's a guy in LA I've become very friendly with named James Anderson. There's a guy who was a gangbanger, right? He actually was convicted of stabbing 2 people, and he got out after several years in prison, He's graduating from UCLA this year. He's been to the White House. There's a mural of him in Philadelphia painted by Shepard Fairey. He's on Governor Brown's board of, I forgot which board. I mean, he's doing tech. He's doing all this other stuff. The problem was he grew up with no love, no appropriate, any kind of interaction with other human beings. He grew up with gangs, with a father who beat him up, a brother who was dealing and got him into the business, and a mother who was, you know, not there. And so what option did he really have? He had to carry a knife just to protect himself. And so at first, you know, you look at it and you go, well, this guy's a violent guy. Why should I care about him? Well, you know what? Google James Anderson and then come back to me and tell me that these people don't deserve a second chance.
Man, everybody deserves a second chance, period. I mean, man, I could tell you president that snort coke. I know president that smoke weed. I probably smoked weed with some of the presidents. You know what I mean? I ain't gonna say no name.
Wait, he said he probably did. Does that mean you don't remember?
Yeah, I can't recall. You
Must have been some good weed.
But no, on the real, definitely, I do believe in second chances, and that's basically why, you know, I support your whole movement with prison reform. And I think it's so important that, you know, we, the musicians, the tech company, that we take the lead in this idea. I know John Legend, different people like Common are just getting involved. And so for me, it was important to come out here and to just express my voice in the sense of saying, these communities really need y'all. And right now, the idea of people getting in prison, doing 21 years, people in this, kids 15 years old in the street getting shot, if we don't come up with a system and hold senators, mayors accountable and start it from ground on up and bottom and let people know we're watching them. And think about it, the tech company is so powerful now, right? Any information they need, when they can't get information out of the government, they basically threaten the tech company and say, look, I need this information. So this is the kind of power that we have now within that tech space. And so let's take that power and let's find a way to turn it into policy, legislation, and hold them accountable before just giving them things.
No, and I'm glad you brought that up too, because at the root of the problem of mass incarceration is the drug war. And I've been, as I said, since the early 90s, I've been on the board of Families Against Mandatory Minimums. And this is a state where you have people locked up for life for weed, right? Which is legal. How do you feel when you're in prison for life for something that's basic? It's legal in 29 states now in some form or another. And the fact is that the mass incarceration problem is so vast that when you look at it, Japan has 70,000 people in prison. You probably have 70,000 people in prison in New Orleans. Now, in Japan, there's 130 million people that live there. So we lock people up at 14 times the rate of Japan per capita. So you have to either look at it and say, and Senator Jim Webb said this to me back when he was in the Senate, either we have the most evil people in the world, or else we're doing something really wrong. And we need to try a new approach, and stopping this mandatory sentencing for nonviolent crimes is a very, very important aspect of it. But we need to reform, and we are reforming the bail system. I don't know if you guys saw last week in Houston, we won a huge case where they're no longer going to be allowed, a federal judge issued a 193-page ruling, they're no longer going to be allowed to lock people up just because they can't post bail in misdemeanor cases, which is obviously a violation of the Constitution. But you know, we do it anyway. So we have a system, you know, we say in the movement, a system in which Robert Durst goes home and Sandra Bland goes to jail is a broken system. And that's another aspect of the problem that's starting to get the attention that it deserves, and we're going to fix it.
Yeah. No, 100%. I mean, it's so funny because anybody here ever got stopped by the police? Yeah. And 9 times out of 10.
And they're mostly white too, by the way.
Yeah. Yo, anybody had like guns drawn at them, like while the police stop them, right? And yeah, and it's a few, right? But it's a very tricky thing, right? Because my first reaction was to run. You know what I mean? Like it's the fear factor kicks in before the idea of, you know what I mean? Because all you see is these guns being drawn. And I think that this is so important because this is an issue that I keep repeating it over and over again. We cannot let this be the new norm, people. Like, we cannot allow this to be the new norm where every 3 weeks a kid is being shot, police is walking, and we're not holding anybody accountable anymore. I think that we really have to look at our reform system and focus on who are we putting in these positions. It is very important. The citizens are losing trust in their law enforcement, no matter what anyone is telling you. And what happens is, and I'm saying that as someone who has law enforcement in their family. So what happens is, if we don't work on this core of this problem, it's gonna eventually turn into a revolution, and the cycle of what you're talking about, no matter as we keep moving, it will never progress. And the last thing I like to say is the core of this problem with the reform situation in the prison is poverty. It's poverty. It's these rural communities have absolutely nothing. If you're in an area where you don't have nothing, you're going to figure out how you're going to get something. That's just the reality of it. So if we can start putting, because think about it, if I'm on the block, man, I'm chilling. I used to be on the block, and I'm on the block. It's a hot day. I don't got nothing to do, right? Yo, what do we do, man? Let's try to move this nickel bag. Man, that nickel bag, I could have been one of them people that you're like, man, this boy named Wyclef Jean got 24 years in prison for weed. This is the kind of reality that we deal with. So I think that focusing on these rural areas, and when we talk about budget deficit and budget cut, when I'm seeing how much money they're cutting back on public schools, cutting back on school programs, all of this is basically crippling an economy. And I think that if we can focus on the core of the problem, we can help the solution at this end.
The good news is that this is a problem that, and one of the things that drew me to this issue is that it doesn't take a lot to move the needle. You know, there's a lot of causes, and a lot of people here are involved in a lot of very good causes, but I look at it as, if I give money to cancer research, it's really not going to move the needle. I mean, there's a lot of hundreds and billions of dollars being spent on that, and here, a little bit of money can go a long way, even if it's as basic as getting these guys set up in a barbershop like we saw this morning. Yeah. The difference that makes, and you know, by the way, we posted on Instagram, he's at Wyclef Jean, and I'm at It's Jason Flom, but I posted a picture with the guy Robert Jones, and we were talking about it. His daughter hit up on Instagram and said, wow, it's so incredible what you're doing for my dad. Now imagine her situation, growing up 23 years, her father in prison for something he didn't do, and then come, and like, what does that mean? So the ripple effect is very, very real. And we also have the ability to make a big impact in terms of district attorneys' races. And we're seeing now, we're in what I call the new age of activism, right? We see, because of the insanity that's going on in Washington, we see people taking to the street in a way that we haven't seen probably since Vietnam or civil rights era, right? True. And we also see that on the heels of the Laquan McDonald and Tamir Rice, the prosecutor in Chicago got voted out, and they brought in a woman, Kim Foxx. There's only, I think 5% of prosecutors in this country are women, which is crazy in the first place. And she's black, which is great. And she's also smart, which is incredible. So she's going to make a huge difference. In Cleveland, the same thing. On the heels of Tamir Rice, the prosecutor got voted out. So a little bit of money dedicated to those touch points, those spots, can really drive a wedge and change the situation for tens of thousands of people at one time. So we have 41 seconds left. I'm turning it over to you.
41 seconds left.
Let's hear it.
My name is Clef. It's no illusion. I came to bust this freestyle for conclusion. Yeah, let me flip the language, let me look backwards, it's no illusion. That's my man, Jason Flom. I flip the language, get your cameras out, let me freestyle in Spanish, like, mira amiga, buenos dias, señorita, como está usted y su familia? I see you smiling, y'all still ain't convinced, y'all might get convinced when I flip it in French. Listen, quand je marche dans la vallée de la mort, je ne crains aucun mal, car tu es avec moi. I think I got 20 seconds left. My name is Wyclef Jean, and I never go out of breath. Americans say, how you doing? German people say, wie geht's? When I go to Germany, they say, wie steht's? If you love hip-hop, let's have some Spaß. Tell me, baby girl, wie wären das? Yeah, my name is Clef, man. I stay in the zone. My people in Brooklyn told me to tell you shalom. But Bismi Allah, Rahman Rahim, all I want is peace around the world, if you know what I mean.
Good job, man. I was going to get up there and freestyle.
I had
but,
you.
know.
I had you. I threw it at you, but you ain't go for it.
You did it. All right, please check out the podcast at Wrongful Conviction. Learn more about the issue, or just wrongful conviction. And Wyclef Jean, one more time for the man.
Yes. Big J.